novel, The Men Within, A Cricketing Tale, has been made into a Telugu movie, Golconda High School. His other books include If You Love Someone, a novel, and two non-fiction books, 50 Not Out, 50 Lessons from Cricket, and This Way is Easier, Dad. As a newspaper columnist, he has written for the New Indian Express, Hans India, The Hindu, Deccan Chronicle, among others. He represented Hyderabad in the Ranji Trophy 1985 to 87 and is currently the chairman of the Senior Selection Committee for the Hyderabad Cricket Association.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Amrish. So we have with us Amrish Kumar, the author of Gods of Willow. It's his debut book. Amrish is an entrepreneur. He's the MD of the Ritu Kumar brand. He's also promoted a record label. Talk about that a little later. And an internet film venture. Small one. A small one. All right. So what's interesting about Gods of Willow, especially for our audience here, is that it's set in Hyderabad. So to start with, maybe you can just give a brief about what the book is about.
Sure. Thank you for your introduction. The book is, at its core, a coming-of-age story. It's a story of a boy growing up from the ages of 19 to that critical stage in your life where you leave university and you start your first job, and what a young man goes through. And that's fundamentally what the story is, but it is set in a the setting, if you like, is a India that is changing. It is an India of the late 90s, where suddenly from a sort of some more socialist, gentle community ecosystem, things were beginning to be schizophrenic, whether it's media coming into our world or it's the various impulses that we never had before. And within that also, it's the social fabric of India itself, the kinds of things that we deal with and even dealing with now. There's communalism, there's different, the sort of class divides that we have in our country, and how a boy has to navigate that into being a man. The leitmotif of this particular guy was that he was a cricket fanatic, as I'm sure many of us, including you, probably were in those years. What I call a cricket tragic if you were supporting the Indian cricket team. So in those years, we didn't win very much. But the thing is, he almost charts his life, much like an astrologer would, with the fortunes of the Indian cricket team. So when the Indian cricket team was doing well, somehow he was doing better, and when it wasn't doing well, somehow he wasn't doing better. So it's got the fabric of what was happening in Indian cricket in the late 90s as a parallel commentary.
Right. So your book is set time-wise in the late 90s, right? So you already have been past the 83 phase. You're winning a few championships. But then I think if you looked at the cricketing analogies you gave throughout the book, you start with Graham Gooch's Triple Hundred and how England completely mauled us through a period of the Desert Storm, and you end with the Calcutta Test. So is that also the time period of the novel? Is that how you visualize that?
It is. I think the Graham Gooch, which was 1990, that was kind of the setting the tone for the early years of the protagonist. What he started to learn about the world from watching the 1990, or actually they weren't telecasting that, it was on radio. And then from things he would read about what would happen in the West Indies, etc. So his window to the world was through cricket. So those passages are essentially to set context to this guy and how he had seen the world.
So this guy is primarily Kabir Menon. Now, does that make him Malayali, or what was it? Or his father's a Tamilian and his mom's a Malayali, and his father grows up in Calcutta. So,
Well, it's not specific. I mean, Menon is a kind of an unspecific name from the south, if you like. And I did that on purpose. I also did it because I think post-independence, places like Calcutta were going through great changes. There was an often migration away from those places that set much of the context for the generation that came after my generation, for instance. So I wanted to have something of an India that had changed previously and an India that was changing now. And the fact that those were instruments, if you like, because I think in that generation, perhaps there was a more egalitarian view on where you came from in this particular in country. And I think that began to start getting strained with more polarization of bits and pieces. And that's actually why I chose Hyderabad, because it is a multi-religious, multitudinal place that perhaps is not one of the big cities that gets all the attention. It still had that small town feel about it. Not that I know Hyderabad very well. This is only the third time I've been here. I just used it and created a fiction for it. That was what I was trying to do.
so it is, since you mentioned Hyderabad, so it is interesting that you said it in Hyderabad, but you don't know as much of Hyderabad as you would have liked.
Yeah, I didn't know very much.
You didn't know very much. So you have references to, let's say, Sikandra University. Is that a vague reference to Osmania University?
Yeah, I mean, of course I did some research. Didn't go in blind, and then I fictionalized something that I would have imagined it to be.
Right.
It wasn't a real place.
So a lot of bakeries come in. There's a lot of biryani joints that come in your description. Even the description of these people walking along the bazaar reminds you of the lanes in your Charminar. So whatever research you've done seems to be fair enough for the context of this book.
Thank you.
Then coming to, would you term it as a cricket fiction book? I mean, since you've titled it Gods of Willow, would you classify it as cricket fiction?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a coming-of-age story. I think cricket is just an instrument I use, and it also adds to the absurdity of essentially men and our clannishness to other men throwing balls around, and why that means so much more to us than it really should. So I think that was why it's not a cricket book per se. Gods of Willow is because the gods in his life were essentially gods of the cricket pitch, which is why the title. But no, at its heart, it's a story of a boy growing up. Because, there is a part in the book where he moves away and he goes to another city and gets his first job and actually has to confront morality as a full-grown adult, which no one has to before you leave home.
Cricket per se to the protagonist, since he doesn't succeed in his cricketing journey. How does, so there is this bit about the gods, all the cricketing heroes in his mind, but how does cricket per se affect him and the choices that he makes in his life? Would you think cricket would have had like winning, losing, failing, not being selected, would all that have had a bearing on his life?
I think no more or less than anything else does for people who are non-cricketers. I mean, it's just, as I said, it's a story of growing up, those disappointments, those successes, the realities of not being cocooned in a safe space, having to make it on your own, the excitement that comes with it, that first rush of freedom when you meet your first girlfriend, if you like, which is all covered in the book. All of those things could be, it could be something else. Cricket just happened to be the instrument I chose because I was a cricket fanatic as well. So it was something that I remember I took from my life. Those stories about Graham Gooch, etc., were pretty much from my own makeup. So I found it, and also I found it quite funny or comedic. It was something that I could use to add that bit of absurdity to one's life in the mix.
So, like Kabir, did you ever go for the intervarsity selections and not get selected?
No, I didn't. I played cricket for university, but that was it. I didn't go any further than that.
Okay. So it is interesting because I think cricket, like perhaps other sports, and this is coming from my own experience, there's a limit to which you pursue. And after that, you realize it's not going to happen. And for me, or especially when I speak to a few of my colleagues also, it's pretty much one of the biggest heartbreaks in your life because it's something you pursued with all your passion, you put all your thoughts, dreams, aspirations behind it, and the moment it breaks, like the time when Kabir does not get selected for the varsity, there's a huge heartbreak for him. That particular moment also is a central point in the book, right?
Yeah, it's an important point in the book. I think, but what's happening around Kabir sort of takes over much the disappointment that he had to go through not getting selected because at that time, without giving too much of the book away, there is social unrest, something that he never even imagined as when he was younger. He has friends from both sides of the track, if you like, or both religions, etc., etc. And things start getting frayed in a way that is completely alien to him. So again, it's the root shock of the way the world really works that sort of takes over from whatever disappointment he had. And I think if you read the book, I think he had hoped he would make it, but I think somewhere deep down he kind of knew he wasn't going to.
And I think that's pretty much what happens with most cricketers. You do hope that something will happen and you do make it. And it turns out that you only go to a certain level and you give up. So I think cricketers, especially, I don't know about other sportsmen, this heartbreak. I know cricketers who, let's say, you give up the game after a particular, let's say, a first-class game. I know a first-class cricketer, or at least a few of them. And they have been dropped after that game. While they're walking away, they're pretty much giving away their kit. I've not seen them touch the cricket bat after, which to me is, it's quite, it's a very violent end to what was perhaps a love story, right? So that will definitely have a huge bearing, especially on somebody as young as, let's say, Kabir, who is also perhaps dealing with a love life which is also not going anywhere. Right? Your core idea, since this is not so much about cricket as you said, your core idea when you started writing the book, so why did you think of this theme? What did you want to convey to the reader? What did you want to say? What was troubling you in that sense?
Actually, this wasn't supposed to be a book. This was supposed to be a movie. And this was an idea that I had many, many years ago when I was sort of going down that path. It's the idea of a coming-of-age story set in India with this kind of context is a mishmash of different influences that I've seen, the things that I've loved to watch, etc. So I think that was a little bit, so I don't know if you've seen Cinema Paradiso, it's an Italian film that has a little bit of that. There is a book called Fever Pitch, which has a similar context, but it's about football and the English football affectation, if you like. So it was all of these different things mixed together. And I think the coming-of-age story is a universal one. It's something that I wanted to tell. And I didn't think it had been done in a way in India that I had seen it. So this wasn't something that just came to me. It was sort of brewing for years. Yeah.
And I suppose the process of writing itself. So this is your debut novel. Did you attempt other novels before, short stories, your writing journey?
No, I had no idea I could write, honestly. So this COVID happened and then I started writing because what else am I going to do? And then I sort of have some friends who are publishers and I sent it to them just a few pages and they thought I had something. So then it just got going from there. Once you start something like this, if you've got something in your mind, if the story is there, they may not be entirely there, but you know the sort of beginning and the end. It can be a really fun process to go through it, which is what happened.
So you can walk us through the the process of how you wrote. I mean, did you start with a short synopsis and then you blew it up further, or how did you go about it?
No, so yeah, I had a beginning about a boy from Hyderabad, and I had few scenes in my head of him, like you were saying, like walking through the bazaar, talking to himself about, his father telling him to get serious about life, about this girl he had seen at college whose name he didn't know, about his friend, about his cricket match, and he's just walking through the bazaar thinking to himself. But the thing he's thinking about the most is that India is playing Australia, and we could get all out this morning if we don't play well. And that's what's going through his head. So that's you're seeing him in his life, and he's walking to college and he's about to, live his days. Then I knew that within that fabric there has to be some push and pull with things that we had witnessed when suddenly we realized that one of our friends is one religion and one of our friends is another religion that we never thought about before. And how, I grew up a little bit in Calcutta, and there was always that underlying history, for want of a better term, of things that had gone wrong. Now, we had never seen it, but the stories were abound. And that is essentially what India was. And also I remember then the setting of the 90s in India. I don't think even we quite realized what a shock to the system it was. Going from Doordarshan Monday to having 14 channels the other day, all blaring at us and having Coke signs everywhere where we never saw anything before. It was a big change. So that's the fabric I had for the start of the thing. And then I knew it had to be a hero's journey, which is a growing up journey. And I knew the end had to be at that test, when the protagonist goes through his hero's journey, if you like, has the rise and then the fall, and then must rise again. And I knew how it had to end. The rest of it I had to figure out. And that was a fun process.
And the characters, did you have clear character sketches? How did you go about developing them? Because they're quite clear, all the central characters.
I think the characters that I knew were him, I knew his parents, and I knew maybe one of his friends. The rest kind of came to me. It wasn't, once it started going, then it sort of became natural where it was gonna head. So I found that the writing process was actually quite a lot of fun when I was doing it. The people I knew, or I'd seen, or I'd imagined, etc., bringing them in, creating the caricatures, if you want, for want of a better term, of each of them. That's how I went through it. I didn't really plot it out very well.
How long did it take, the entire process, start to finish, to write this book?
Not very long. I think it took me less than a year. And then there was the editing period, which took a few months. But it was COVID. Literally, I was watching paint dry. What else am I going to do?
Would you like to read a passage from the book?
So one of the passages I've just opened up is within the book. There are just little vignettes of things that happen in the cricket world, and I'll just read one of those. And these are matches and how Kabir, the protagonist, reacts to them. This is in his own words. So David versus Goliath, Bangalore 1996, Jadeja versus Wakar. If there ever was a David versus Goliath cricket equivalent, it occurred on this crucial quarter-final World Cup match. Matches versus Pakistan were grudges. Even purists who would applaud a good performance, irrespective of their affiliation, abandoned their even-handed magnanimity and turned into baying partisans. Perhaps it's because the countries were partitions 50 years ago and the wounds never healed. Perhaps it's because we fought wars and there remained the question of Kashmir. Perhaps it's because we look the same, talk the same, dress the same, eat the same. It makes the rivalry more personal. In truth, the Indian fan came off as insecure, while the Pakistani seemed self-assured. At the time, we overemphasized our national virtues to outsiders as though we weren't entirely convinced by them ourselves. This tournament was held in India under lights. It was glitzy. The team had superstars and endorsements came thick and fast. The sensory overload rendered the crowd schizophrenic. One moment an Indian batsman would hit a boundary, they were delirious with joy. The next moment when an Indian batsman was declared out, dejectedly they fell into a collective bereavement. The opposition fielders could be forgiven for feeling less than confident standing at the boundary. For any minute, a missile would hasten their chances of reincarnation. Kabir felt none of the animosity when thinking of Pakistan. What he felt was a nagging dread, considering the mercurial talent in the opposition ranks. In those days, the Pakistan team seemed to toy with the Indians. A frequent topic of anguish was their ability to produce strapping, tall, dangerous, long-haired fast bowlers whose singular purpose seemed to terrorize batsmen. India never produced that quality of fast bowlers. Instead, we produced thin, bespectacled spin bowlers with the guile who could outfox batsmen but not intimidate them. While it was quite certain the Indian bowlers would have been successful engineers or accountants and definitely had better alternative job prospects than the Pakistanis, Kabir and the Indian fans would have given a bucket of spinners for the threatening Goliath or two. The toppling of that very Goliath is chronicled in the Indian cricket equivalent of a biblical story. Towards the end of India's batting innings stood Ajay Jadeja, a fidgety, gangly lad from Delhi whose technique resembled a professional fly swatter. All wrists and flap, he had somehow managed to avoid every correct habit of batsmanship. Facing him at the end of the run-up was a muscular sultan of swing, the toe crusher, Waqar Yunus, a man fresh from vanquishing the English in their backyard. All the other recognized batsmen had been dismissed, and the Indians did not have a competitive score on the board yet. Kabir was on a stupid class trip to a stupid wildlife reserve on this critical day of his life. Honestly, what was the point of sitting in this forest rest house, cut off from an event capable of changing the course of history? Luckily, in the kitchen, a cook had a transistor radio, and some friends were sitting around the now defunct fireplace, trying to discern the commentary through a crackling transmission. Waqar Jadeja, oh, he smashed it. That could be 6. It is 6. That's gone miles over the top. What a little beauty. Tony Gregg's breathless commentary sent the boys into raptures. It was a practical demonstration of sacred texts, the morals from Aesop, the lessons from the battlefield of the Gita. The impossible was happening. David was slaying Goliath.
Thank you. That was very nice. Now that was the Bangalore test, the Bangalore one day, in the World Cup. So which is your favorite match that, for you stands out as?
I mean, there are so many. It's difficult to beat the Calcutta test, right? I mean, that's right up there. But any test where we win overseas is something you watch on repeat on YouTube.
Including the one against South Africa recently.
Yeah, that's still fresh. I'm not going to watch that just yet. It'll give me a few months. But I think annually I will probably watch that the highlights of that series.
Oh, you do?
Probably.
So you have set your book, the first half of the book is set in Hyderabad. And then your protagonist leaves everything behind, his friends, family, girl, cricket, and then moves to Bombay. And it's still Bombay, right? No, it's already Mumbai then. Anyway, moves to Mumbai and completely charts a different course. So what were you thinking when you set him up in that media kind of job?
Well, as I said, I think the change of India was very significant then. He gets set up in a TV news channel. And they were brand new at that time. There were suddenly 10 of them. And it was that very heady time where things were changing and nobody really knew what shape they were going to take. So I wanted him to be immersed in that part of India that was really going to become so very important, and what was happening in the frenzy of it all. And also, it's a useful device because it also enables me to go back to the other fundamental questions of the fabric of our society and what was happening, which is then you're leading back to things like communalism, things like capitalism and what it was doing and how it was changing everything, and the right and wrong of people coming from nowhere and becoming something. So I tried to infuse a little more, as much of that as I could, into the narrative, which is why I took that path.
So that said, Sareen and Mustafa, his two friends, how do they kind of support him through the journey, through this story?
I mean, they don't, in the sense that they're not always in touch. When he leaves Hyderabad and moves, he leaves alone. And he has to stand on his own 2 feet. And I think that struggle is half the book.
Right.
But they are essentially what is home to him. You know, what is the place that he came from. And, you know, I think one of the things that is important in a hero's journey is to have that betrayal of safety, which we must all go through in some form or the other, whereby you then have to swim. And that was one of the things that happened, that he realized that life just can't be this smooth. Life isn't this smooth sailing. Things can and do go horribly wrong. So his safety net is pulled away from him. But then he comes back and realizes that that's not the end of the world. I mean, that's essentially the story of all our lives, I think.
So he comes back, he leaves what is possibly a bright future in the media industry. And do you see him coming back to Hyderabad in the end?
I don't know. We'll have to write a sequel for
You
that.
seem to, right. And does he go back to Sahiba, or Natasha is another wait and watch?
Well, I mean, I don't think many people have read the book, so I think we're giving it all away. But we'll see. You could go either way. He could come back. I honestly think he'll go back to Bombay.
He's going to dump Sareen and go back to Bombay.
By sort of moving cities.
So do you see this being made to a movie at some point?
Well, I hope so. I mean, that was kind of the point of it all. But I think this day and age, perhaps this subject matter is not really kosher. We'll give it a few years and see what happens.
You think so? I mean, how do you make that out, whether the subject matter is kosher or not? I can't. So I'm
There are
asking
things that I touch upon in this book with reference to perhaps political rabble-rousing within communities, which may not be something that people want to touch. In fact, that's the message I've got back from people in Bombay. But we'll see.
Give it some time.
Yeah.
So your vice chancellor is named Harshad Bhosle,
Sorry?
the vice chancellor in the university.
Yeah.
Some reference to Harsha Bhogle?
No.
Just
Just coincidental.
Okay.
Just coincidental.
Just coincidental. Okay, all right. So when you would say the reader wants to read this particular book, so why should any reader pick up Gods of Willow?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, I think it's a coming-of-age story in India at a time where there are not many coming-of-age stories. I like to think that it's reasonably well written, although you should be telling me that. But and I think the subject matter is something that's very universal and will appeal to us all, so that's why.
Okay, brilliant. So shall I throw it up for questions now? Any questions from the audience? Because I'm
Coming to the HLF and speaking about your book, I also chair the organizing committee of the HLF. So, welcome to you on that from that team as well. The passage that you read speaks about the mentality of the average Indian fan who is watching the game. And besides not appreciating the good cricket which the opposition is kind of displaying, they also turn abusive, they throw missiles at players. Cricket watching has become very jingoistic, it is kind of a pseudo-nationalism. And very recently when India lost to Australia, this was very much commented about in Ahmedabad. In fact, I was also there at the stadium and I did witness all this. So, and many people actually suggested that in future do not host these kind of marquee games in Ahmedabad, host them in maybe Calcutta or Bangalore or Bombay, somewhere else. So, I mean, how do you think of this phenomena? Will it eventually turn cricket watching or cricket following into a very extreme kind of jingoistic thing where the serious cricket lover who wants to enjoy the game and see the finer points of the art of cricket being on display, he will be kind of pushed aside, marginalized. I've not read the book, so I don't really know how does Kabir operate, but my guess is that he's someone who is more towards the refined aspects of cricket rather than carrying a flag or painting the Tiranga on his face and shouting in that stadium.
No, I can't agree with you more. I think this last World Cup, saw or witnessed or felt a certain, as you said, jingoistic, shrill kind of response to something that I don't think is restricted to cricket. I think even in the passage, I was writing about 96, and there was the semi-final was called off because people were throwing things on the, I don't know if you remember the India-Sri Lanka semi-final was called off in Calcutta. I would even suggest that at that time, we were still gentler. I think this nationalism or rejuvenation of India, whatever they like to call it, at the risk of tempting ridicule, I put my hat in the ring and say that it's very ugly. And I think it's going beyond cricket, and cricket is the one thing that we have now achieved such dominance of in terms of our power in the world game, that we are flexing our muscles in an extremely ugly and not sporting way, if you want, for want of a better term. And I'm with you. This is the first World Cup where I felt not comfortable as a supporter of Indian cricket. I don't like where it's going.
Going forward, I completely agree with you, but going forward, I mean, taking Jayesh's question, do you think that burden of expectations affected the team's performance also? Would you think? I would.
Probably, but I mean, it's not like they're not used to expectation. I think Australia was just a smarter team on the day. It happens, it's a sport. Perhaps we did tactically, we were a little bit off. And some days you can have an off day, and I think we had an off day. It should go into the annals of the sport as something that happened. But certainly it should not go into the history books as the way we behaved as a nation. That's the sad thing.
Are you working on your next book?
I'm working on another book, but it's not about cricket. It might have similar themes, but not cricket themes. So let's see.
All right. And do you see yourself writing more and more books?
No, actually, I finally see myself actually making movies, which is what I wanted to start with.
Okay.
When I get time, I scribble a little bit and see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Amrish.
Thank you.
And for a wonderful time. And
Lovely meeting you. Thank you for having me.
very nice book, Gods of Willow, very accessible, very readable. And if you are from Hyderabad, obviously, there's a lot of Hyderabad in the book that you'll identify with. The cricket part's very well written. The characters stand out. I love the book through and through. So go buy it. I'm sure it's out there in the bookstall. And you can get it signed by Amrish. You're here for a couple of days?
I leave tomorrow.
All right. So you got time till tomorrow to get the signature. All right. Okay then. As soon as I get the passes. We haven't got passes yet. So, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Audience. Thank you, Amrish.